What up? What up? What up? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is another Sean P experience. I have a very, very special guest today. Oh, I think something dropped. Get my guest. Okay, here we go. I think she's back.
That was strange.
Yeah, it was. All right, here we go. Take two. Let's do it. Oh, wow. I wonder why when she comes in it drops. I wonder why it dropped when you came in.
I don't
That's
know.
crazy.
I hope it doesn't do it again. I don't know
I
why
hope
it's
not.
doing that.
Let's
Okay.
go.
Okay.
You ready? Here we go.
Mhm.
What up, what up, what up? It's your man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience. I am your host, public speaker, self-published author, podcast host, the Sean P Experience, where I bring in writers, creators, editors, avid book lovers. This is a very extraordinary, unique situation.
I don't know what to do. It keeps
That's
kicking me out.
crazy. I was kicking out.
It's fine as soon as okay. Well,
You might want they want to try like getting all the way out and then come back in, maybe like all the way off StreamYard and then come back to the link.
okay, I can try
You're
that.
trying to troubleshoot some kind of way. Yeah.
Um, okay, let's see. I'll leave.
All right. Let's go, universe. Come on, God. Mm-hmm. All right. Here we are. We have liftoff. All right. What up? What up? It's the man Sean P coming in live. This is the Sean P Experience. I'm your host, public speaker, self-published author, and podcast host of Sitting with the Griots, where I bring in authors, filmmakers, and book readers, talk about their experience and taking some of their jewels for our everyday life. I have a very special guest today, Miss C. Rice.
Hi. So happy to be here with you.
Yes, ma'am. Such an honor. Let me give you an official introduction. We have CC Rice, a master voice and speech professor and a master Reiki practitioner and a meditation guide and a seasoned actor director and dialect coach. She holds a
Mhm.
master's in fine arts from Brown University and brings the depth of the stage to the spirit of everyday life. She is the creator of guided inspiration and the art of awareness, pathways that have helped countless people find their voice, their center, and their power. Her work is where artistry of breath meets the science of sound, where the mindfulness meets the practical demands of living fully awake. Today we're talking about her Amazon best-selling book, The Root of Awareness, and explore what it truly means to be present and to listen deeply, to live with intention in a world often trying to pull us from ourselves. Please welcome to the show the insightful, soulful, dynamic CC Rice.
Oh, thank you so much for that. That's so nice. It's always a little strange to hear my accolades
Mhm.
packaged. So thank you for that. I
Yes,
appreciate it.
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. The pleasure's all mine. So my
Mhm.
first question is, on this show, a lot of my guests are like writers and people that want to write.
Yeah.
So tell us about your beautiful book launch you just had about a week ago. 'Cause I
Hmm.
want like people often like they attend a book launch or you go to a speaking engagement. What's it like being the person of the book launch?
Very emotional, honestly. It's such a culmination of years of work. I wrote the book starting in November. So in terms of book writing, it's a very fast process to go from November to May and complete a book. But part of the reason I was able to write the book so quickly was because these are all of the things that I have spent my entire life finding, working toward, teaching, explaining, lecturing, coaching, and putting it into the book just felt like a channeling experience. There was very little hesitation about it. And so it really flowed through me pretty, I shouldn't say easily, but it did happen pretty easily. And then having the book launch, just there was so much energy in the room. There were so many people there. There were a lot of people that I don't know personally, and also a lot of family and friends and people who've known me in many other capacities throughout my life who are seeing me and recognizing me for the first time as an author. And it felt very much like stepping into a new form of my own power, and having an entire community lift me up and say, we support you. We don't know what this project is yet because we haven't read it, and yet we support you. And that is something different than what we do with music or with a film. We lift it after we've seen it, after we've digested it, after we've understood it. But with a book, you have to decide before you know what's there that you are going to engage. And it was a beautiful experience to see how people chose to engage and to be open to the principles of the root of awareness without knowing where it was going to take them. And that was just a magical and beautiful experience to have. It was overwhelming at times. I cried throughout the whole thing, and it was one of the hottest days in New York that there's ever been. And so I was sweating, and the internet was going out because it was so hot, and all the systems were overwhelmed, and I could feel all the energy just mounting in this space. And so it was glorious. It was really nice.
Now, I definitely appreciate the depth of that analogy because I want people to really understand it and motivate them as they're writing and things get tough and you're doing the editing process at 2 in the morning. Like, I want you to get to that finish line, you know?
Talk about 2 in the morning. I mean, I am the kind of person who really likes to work when it's quiet and when the world is asleep and away, and I'm not going to be distracted by a car driving by or a siren or, any of those things. And so I, for the past several months, have become a nocturne. And, you know, that was the way in which this book really came to be, was at the early morning, late night hours when I could just focus and not be distracted. I knew there weren't going to be emails coming in, there weren't going to be calls coming in, and I could really envelop myself in the work. So that is facts.
Yeah, yeah. So, my friends and I are big on celebrating because a lot
Yes.
of us are hard charging people. We're so focused on the next thing, the next thing. What was the first thing you did to celebrate yourself?
Oh, well, I actually did a little post about this, where I said, you know, it's a little bit of a secret to how to manifest success, but part of that manifesting of success is to feel the success, to celebrate the success, to celebrate the conclusion and the completion before you arrive at the destination. And so the night before my actual book launch, some very good friends of mine opened their restaurant to me and sponsored a launch party where my oldest friends, my mentors, people who I talk about in the book quite a bit, were present and celebrating. And I was able to put the book in their hands and, hear their love and congratulations in real time. And that energy led into the launch day and really reinvigorated me to do that final push. And it felt like working with the energy of the universe. I am a big fan of utilizing the energy of the universe, and that includes astrology. And the book launched on the day of the new moon, and the book party was on the day of the Jupiter Kazemi going into the new moon. So there was a potent energy of newness that was coming about. And I had been thinking about that months prior, that I had chosen this day where I knew the energy was lucky, where I knew the energy was going to be potent, and I knew that energy was going to be supportive and alive, and I knew it was going to be emotional. And I also knew that, talk a lot about emotions in the book and how they live in us. And a Cancer new moon is a emotional reset. And it felt to me like that is the perfect time to celebrate bringing and birthing something new into the world, growing into the next thing. This is an energy about planting seeds. And as you can see on the book cover, that's the image that I'm trying to evoke with this work, is that we must root down, we have to plant so that we can grow to our fullness.
So to get this right, you strategically planned out your book launch date with the stars and the moon. Like you
Oh,
really
yes.
started it out.
Oh, yes, absolutely. You know, uh, when we look for what should I be doing? When's it going to work? We have an idea based on when we complete something, but there are certain energies that are good for completion, and there are certain energies for good that are good for starting. And so in May, I was at a very big completion energy. The season was about to end. We were getting to the end of spring. I knew that summer was coming. We were about to approach the solstice in 3 weeks. And my publishers, they set the date for your book launch about a month before, which is not typical. Most book launches are dates are set, several months in advance, but that's usually because the book has been completed for a really long time and you're working on these larger scales. But for us, that wasn't the case. So it was important to me to take a look at the calendar and say, well, what's the energy I'm working with now? May, I'm feeling completion. I'm feeling this earth energy that's saying, all right, get stable, get this thing wrapped up as this season is closing out, close out this season of development. And now, as a new season begins, the brightness of the sun is really returning. Take that energy to push into the next phase, which is sharing the book, expanding. I spent half the year basically in a room by myself, working on, of course, social media posts, but working on, the book itself. And then there had to be a time where it was proper to give away that time that I had spent alone and expand it into something that everyone could share with me, even though they weren't in the room with me as it was created. So, yes, well, the universe does
Now
that.
that's you probably the first author ever had say something like that. Like you hear about parents planning to have a child at a certain time and they really charted out as far as parents and the child, but never like birthing the book. Like that's very unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually described many times to my friends that it felt like I was giving birth to a book. The day that I completed the writing process, not the editing, because that went on for a bit longer, but when I really said, okay, this is it, I finished it, I went to bed and I woke up the next day and I felt like I had a hangover. My body was exhausted. I was sore. I was achy. I was tired. And all I had been doing was writing. I wasn't running around, but there was such an expulsion of energy that it felt like I needed to rest after giving birth to this process, to this product. And I treated it that way. I acknowledged it that way. I had friends feed me. I had, people come over and nurture me. And that was how I expect and would hope that we treat those who, give birth to babies, that we go and we nurture them and we build them back up and we take away some of their other responsibilities so that they don't have to do it all themselves because they've done this really big thing on their own, right?
Man, sure, sure. Let's talk about the writing process. You said earlier how it kind of flowed through you. It kind of came easily. Could you describe to us some of the behind the scenes of your writing process? And again, I like trying to encourage future writers. So some of your tricks and tactics and
Hmm. So one of the big things to know is I'm a voice and speech teacher. That's my background. I'm an actor, right? And so my way of connecting to language is through speech. However, I consider myself a writer. And when I sit down to write, I'm very particular about my voice. And I'm really with the page and I'm with the energy and I go back and I reread and um, however, when my publishers approached me and told me about the way that they do their process in order to get a book done quickly, they said, what we do is we'll put you on a Zoom call with one of your project managers, and you'll outline the entire book first, which I had already been working on. And so we made some adjustments to that. And then for each chapter, we'd go through and we'd bullet point the chapter. And then on this Zoom call, they would set up a transcription recording, and I would just lecture and I would just talk through each section of the book. And we did that for about half the book. So I wrote half of it traditionally on my computer, going back, and especially the beginning of the book, the first couple chapters that I had been working on already prior to working with my publishers. And then when I started working with my publishers, it was essentially doing a lecture series. And that's essentially the entire middle section of the book. It was lectured out loud. And so you can tell a little bit in reading the book when the tone shifts a bit from bit of formality and structure to there being a little bit more immediacy where I'm really talking to the reader, less about myself, but more directly. And that is an indicator of where the method switched. And so what we did after those transcriptions were made, they sent me a big file of transcriptions, which was overwhelming to see, oh my gosh, that's how much I spoke. That's how long a chapter is when you speak for 45 minutes or an hour. And then I went and edited that and made it into a bit more digestible energy, took out some of the things that I say a lot, but I don't need to write every time. Lots of sentences beginning with so and now, because that's the way I speak. I was able to go in and say, yeah, I can just get to the meat. I can just say what I mean without that preamble because I was able to use my speech training to ramp myself into the thought. And then once it was there, I could get rid of the ramp and leave the thought. So the process was accelerated largely because I was able to teach the chapters and have someone to land it on. We were talking about this just before we came on live, that it's important when public speaking that you land the energy outside of you so that you don't implode in the energy and you can hear yourself for the first time when you have some place to put it. And so having my project development person, my editors, there with me listening, and they knew nothing about the subject I was speaking of. So they're complete novices. These aren't people who are following me on social media and sort of understand some of the principles that I was going to talk about. This was brand new to them. So having that experience of speaking to people for whom this is brand new allowed me to ground in to the steps. Okay, what do you really need to know in order to understand these principles at a higher level? Where does it begin? What's the root? And that's essentially what the book is about. And it begins with these very rooted principles, the Hermetic codes and the chakra system and the tree of life. And that speaking those things to a new audience, to a new person, really helped me to take the reader along on a journey that could have been over most people's heads. And rather than that, I wanted to make sure that this was a book, not just for actors, not for people who already have some understanding of these tools, but for anyone. Yeah.
Right. Wow. So, as you were writing your chapters, you being a public speaking person, did you actually like take and like read it aloud to hear how it sounds? Because
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
big on telling my writing friends like, continue doing the audio book and like, how does this sound when you're reading it?
Right.
Is it too many words? Do you need something here? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you can only really tell it by saying it. You can't really read it.
Absolutely. I'm an actor, so language on a page is just one piece. If it can't live in the mouth, if it can't live in the air, if it can't live through sound, if there isn't a real sense of pitch and breath, it doesn't really make sense to me. So I absolutely read aloud. And one of the other things about the process, when I went through to do the final edit, I was having a ton of anxiety about what did I even write? Because I write plays typically or speeches, and I can digest that all in one sitting and read it multiple times and go back over it and make sure it makes sense. There's no way I'm reading this all in one sitting, right? Even to proof it. But I needed to feel the entire energy of the book to make sure it was cohesive, to make sure that there was nothing missing, to make sure that there weren't mistakes or, things that leaped without being explained. I wanted to make sure I hadn't cut too much. I did a lot of editing because I felt that there were things that were too long and I didn't want the book to be too long. And so I did a lot of cutting things out. So I had to make sure that the flow that was there when I first spoke it remained. And so what I did was I hooked up that final draft PDF that my editors sent to Speechify, and I put it on 4 times speed, which is, you cannot listen that fast. I mean, it is rapid. It doesn't even sound like human language. But what it did was it helped me to speed read and stay focused because it's clipping through each thing. So I listened to it with Gwyneth Paltrow's voice, and but at hyper speed, so it didn't sound like Gwyneth anymore, unfortunately. But listening to it at hyper speed so that I could digest the entire book in about 4 hours, 5 hours. That was how I did that final pass, was so that I could make sure, does this really go start to finish and take us on a journey, or are there pieces missing? And after doing that process, that was the first time I felt like I can let go. I'm done. I did it. It makes sense. I felt it. I heard it. I went through it. I rode that wave and I found myself in a new place by the time I finished. And so that is, another little tip and trick that I highly, highly recommend.
Yes, for sure. Um, Give me some like writing plays. I'm glad you said that. I had a question here about my fiction writing friends. The things you talk about in the book about our body language, tone of voice, facial things you highlight all the time. How could these fictional writers use these things to describe a scene in a story without just like over describing it, over saying it? A
Uh-huh.
certain thing a person does could say a lot, right?
Yeah.
How could they use that in your opinion?
Well, I think one of the ways to use it is to interact with someone who does have a deep understanding of how the body functions in the world. And that's part of the reason why I wrote this book, is that it is for deepening our understanding of what do you need to know about the body? What conveys energy? What conveys meaning? What do those things mean? And so that if you can understand that the root of the body, the hips down to the toes, all the bones, are where we store ancient energy, where we store our fight flight responses, where our body reacts to the space around us, whether through discomfort, safety, security, and trust. Those are the principles of the root. If you understand that and you want to create a character who has trust issues, if you want to create a character who feels insecure, describe their root and its disruption. What is it doing? If you want to create a character who has confusion, who has spiritual psychosis, describe what's happening with their head, their brain, their, how they deal with and gesture toward their upper body. You want a character who is confused, lacks clarity, is a liar. Give us energy and information about their throat center, their mouth, their nose, their teeth, their lips, the tip of their tongue. That is how you can convey character. I talk about this also in the book. You learn in acting class that characters that are fear based, that are earthy, that are miserly, that are connected to physical energies, characters who are sexually driven, they tend to be closer to the ground, wider stances, open hips, right? Lower voices. Intellectual characters, or characters even who are not intellectually developed, tend to lead from a place up here, right? That openness of, I don't know, I have no thought in my head, right? I'm lifting and I'm finding in the space above, versus someone who's, gruff and deep and thinks that they have a deep understanding, or they want to make you afraid. I'm going to use lower energies. I'm going to drop down in the voice. I'm going to use lower pitch. If somebody is an intellectual, we're going to nasalize their voice. They're going to be a little bit more forward, a bit more concentrated in the mask space, because they're not actually activating the lower parts of the body and the breath, and they're not dropping down into their authentic voice. They've sort of reached up and out of and away from the physical world, and they're completely inhabiting the intellectual world. The difference between watching Fox News and watching MSNBC. You watch Fox News, you're going to hear a lot of deeper, guttural, louder sounds. You're going to hear more fear-based tactics. You switch over to MSNBC, and welcome to the eggheads. It's going to be a lot of understanding, and things are going to come up here, and you're going to hear a lot of nasalized voices. You're going to hear a lot of quick speech that brings us to a heady conclusion. You're going to hear convoluted sentence structure. You're going to hear overcomplicated language, versus Fox News, simple sentence structure, lots of punctuation, lots of back and forth, a lot of combative language and energy and thought, because what they're trying to do is evoke a visceral response, versus a network that's trying to evoke an intellectual response. One is trying to get you to do something, the other is trying to get you to think something, or to learn, or to know something, right?
Man, that was good. Anybody watching this, man, please, you got some gems right there. She's sprinkling right now. Uh, Give me your professional opinion about this concept. My book club and I, for the past couple years, reading these fictional books together, right? We notice a lot of times the author is using smiling, but it's never in the proper way you would imagine a smile. A
Hmm.
smile, a laugh, a chuckle is not what you think it is most times in those moments. Like, why do
Mm.
you think that they're using that device? Is my question.
Because we innately understand that there are a multitude of expressions that can come through what we call a singular name, right? We have nervous laughter, we have genuine laughter, we have uh, laughter that is masking something else, right? We have a smile and we have a grimace, and a grimace can look like a smile, but we know that it's not, because there's tension elsewhere. And so sometimes we express in singularity what a reader will understand in multitude, and sometimes we express in specific what we want a reader to understand exactly as we intend. And I think both things are useful. I don't think it's useful necessarily to always talk about a smile as though it's only one kind of smile, but it's also not necessarily useful to be so particular that we can't understand character, because we understand character by habit and repetition. So somebody has to do something multiple times for us to understand that it is part of their character, rather than, if we get so stuck in the minutia, we may not be repeating enough energy or enough language that helps us understand this is their character. This is not just a description of what is happening right now. This is a description that is specific to how this person habitually moves through the world.
Thank you very much for clarifying that for us. We're always debating amongst ourselves about the smile concept. So
Hmm.
thank you very much for that. I want to
Yeah.
go to early in the book, your childhood situations and struggles. A
Hmm.
person to see you in all these viral videos and you're everywhere and the book and everything's wonderful. They would
Hmm.
never imagine the things you gave in the book when your childhood. Tell us about
Hmm.
the importance of laying the foundation of your early roots and about being vulnerable as a writer, the
Yeah.
vulnerability.
Yes. One of the big lessons that I learned, and I don't remember who said this, but they were talking about writing a memoir. And they said that the first manuscript is for you. Do not ever give anybody that first manuscript. That is your therapy. That is your opportunity to put down on paper all the hurtful, painful, disastrous things that have happened, that have shaped you. And then your job as the writer is to go back and say, now that I've processed who I am and what I've done. What does the reader need to understand the story? And what do I need to share with the world versus what has happened to me? And they're not the same thing. So there's plenty of things that didn't make it into the book, right? First chapter can only be so long. So there's a lot of things that hit the cutting room floor. But there were things that were essential to understanding how I developed as a voice and speech teacher that I couldn't ignore, that had to be there. And so learning about how I was a tense person, that I processed with tension, as I say in the book, my way of concentrating to this day, when I'm not paying attention to it and I'm not working through it, when I'm writing, or, I'm writing a letter, I'm concentrating, I'm coloring, whatever I'm doing, I usually chew my tongue. I'm like sitting there chewing on that tongue. And it is hereditary. My younger sister also does it. One of her kids does it. And so a thing that I thought was, oh my gosh, this horrible thing that I do that I always got in trouble for in class because all my teachers thought I was chewing gum, was actually really essential to me understanding how I was processing, how I was concentrating. And my form of concentration included a lot of stemming, right? So that chewing my tongue essentially was stemming. I really struggled with language. I was never a person who could spell. I had a lot of struggles anytime we took a spelling test. I knew all the words. I had a great vocabulary. I was always a really great communicator, even as a child, but I had a hard time translating that into language. I didn't know at the time, and partly because I was never tested for this as a child, but as I started to read and research, I thought, oh, I'm dyslexic. Oh, I get it. Not everybody sees things upside down and backwards, or when I try to remember something and I write it down, I've written it in the reverse order that it is. This was a thing I discovered. When I started driving, I would look at where I was going, and the address would say 4023 Main Street. And I'd be driving around looking for 2340 Main Street. Or, I would rearrange letters, I'd rearrange words. And I didn't understand that there was an explanation for that. I didn't understand that everybody didn't have that. And it's part of the reason why I don't name a lot of the disorders and things that I later discovered. In that first chapter, I speak about it from the experience of it. So I talk about chewing my tongue, but I don't call it stimming because that's not something that I knew at the time. So by labeling as that, it would have expressed a kind of knowing that I did not have at the time that it was happening. It was important to me to explain and quantify the action rather than qualify how it would later develop and what my later understanding of it would be. And early on in life was when a lot of traumatic events happened for me that later I understood. But I wanted to stay in that space of what it was like for me as an 8-year-old to experience those things without the knowledge of 40-year-old me imposing on top. So, as writers, as public speakers, our story, our purpose is paramount. If you are writing even fiction, if you don't have a personal way in, if you don't have a personal story that connects you to what it is that you're writing, you have to understand that you are just qualifying. You're standing outside of it and saying, this is what it is. But when you're in it, you quantify this happened, then this happened, then this happened, then this happened. And I understand those dominoes, not because that's how it's going to happen in every situation or how it's going to happen for every person, but I can understand that that is how it happened in my experience for me. And therefore, it is valid, it is worthy, and it is worth explaining and understanding.
Were there any moments in the book that you almost held back because of fear, but then you chose to be courageous and like, you know what? I'm gonna go and put on the line anyway. Was there any moments like that?
There were things, those things are not in the book. So the things that are in there are the things that I felt needed to be shared. things that I have worked through and worked on so that I have removed the shame, that I do not personally hold the shame from things that other people did to me. It is not my shame to hold, it is their shame to keep, and I've given them back that shame. There are things that I took out of the book that were not mine to share. So there were things about my family members, there were things about my knowledge of how their actions affected me that I realized I am not the person to share that, because that actually isn't my story. And that actually isn't for me to process here with the world. It made me discover that there are still things that I need to go and process personally with those people. So I recognized that there were things in the book that I couldn't write about for the first time if I hadn't actually done the work of having the conversation with that person about. If I hadn't actually given them the opportunity to take that energy or to apologize or to process with me, then it wasn't going to go in the book, because that meant that it wasn't for me to share. It was for me to further process with that person. And I also realized there was plenty. I could have gone through every trauma, and that could have really weighed down and muddied the water about what exactly was important for me to find my healing and to find my practice. And I speak about healing and practice very differently, because there is no such thing as healed. There's no such thing as done. There's only the practice of healing. And so it is continual. And I wanted to be honest with myself about continual healing and recognizing where I am, that there are certain parts of my life and my experience that are still in process and in progress, which means they don't go in the book yet until I have a perspective on it that is worth sharing so that it is helpful. If I'm still muddy in the water, then I need to do more development.
Wow, thank you very much for that. Thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
you speak about the ancient practices and other like spirit systems, the tree of life, the hermetic principles, the chakra system. I love these things, but some people are very afraid of these practices for different reasons. So when a person comes to you for help, and you see that they have this apprehension, but you know it could be something that could be helpful, how do you navigate those kind of situations and spaces?
I make sure that people understand the difference between religious and spiritual, that they understand the difference between physical reality and perception. That's the first hermetic code, is mentalism, perspective, point of view. How you see the world is particular to you. And we all have to understand that we have perspective, and that our perspective actually cannot be fully shared by another person. No one can see the world exactly through my eyes. So even if you think you agree with someone about what your spirituality is, even if you think you agree with someone about what your religion means, it is still individual to you. The Bible verse that connects the most to you might not be the one that connects the most to someone else. They may completely ignore that verse because it doesn't apply, or they don't want to apply it. So I make sure that people understand that not all practices are in opposition to your belief system or your religion. And if you cannot add, then you're in a silo, right? So what I discovered, I actually have a mentor who I talk about in the book, Carolyn Swift Jones, who practices mediumship. She's also extremely religious, and she is a minister. And yet she works with spirits that have passed and guides people through past lives and helps them speak to their ancestors. And there are people, I'm sure, within Christianity that would say that's a no-no, that you can't do that. And yet here is this person who is a minister that found a way to utilize both. And instead of being, smited down by God, was instead given this incredible gift to be able to help people through that practice, even for people who don't share the same practice. And, I grew up in the church, but there was always something that was missing for me. And when I was in my first reading, my first mediumship reading with Carolyn, she said to me, she picked up on the dissatisfaction that I've had with religion. And she said to me, you will find that satisfaction when you go back and you study ancient religion, right? When you study what came before the Abrahamic religions, if you can go all the way back and really start to understand what brought us to these splits in the religions that are practiced today. And when I started to do that, a light bulb went off, because what I discovered was that there were more universal principles that applied to everybody around the world than what we have now, which is a lot more separated and siloed. And as I did that discovery and that work, I recognized the tree of life is in every culture all over the world. I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine last night who came um, and she said, I don't know if you know this, and I don't know if you had talked to anybody about this, but in Korea, we talk about the difference between soul and spirit. And I said, no, I didn't know that particularly from Korea, but I had encountered it in so many other cultures and in so many other spaces that was when I started to realize, to me, that is what truth, when things are reinforced beyond space and beyond time, a group of people in a place have an easy time agreeing because they're having a similar and shared experience. But people with disparate experiences in different places having a shared experience, now to me, that is where we encounter truth. And so that tree of life concept of soul being about the roots, ancestry, the earth, we leave our bones behind and return them to the earth when we pass. Our flesh dissolves and returns to the earth, but our consciousness and our spirit goes elsewhere. And so the idea that the spirit is not contained solely within the body, but it is something we connect to from the body, from the physical experience, while the body is this middle space where we also connect to our ancestry. We are literally carrying our ancestors' physical matter, their DNA, their skin tone, their eye color in and on our bodies. And so we are both spirit, body, and soul all at once. I also say, the gut, and that gut intuition is connected to the body. Gut intuition is about the physical safety of our body. We walk into a room and the temperature feels off and the people aren't right, and our body says go. It's protecting the physical being, right? You hear that chime, or you feel that gut punch that says turn left, don't you turn right. That physical safety is keeping that body safe, whereas the intuitive center keeps the spirit safe. When this goes off and we have a vision, we have a dream, we have an idea, we have a daydream about, oh, something's going to happen tomorrow. That's happening on a spiritual plane. It's going to affect our ability to connect to the collective, our ability to connect to our spiritual safety. And those are different instinctual places. So we have multiple spaces of intuitive understanding. The heart is another space like that. And then we talk about science. When people are, oh, I only believe in science, I don't believe in any kind of spiritual, religious, anything. Well, science tells us that the heart thinks, because there are neurological cells in the heart that react and respond before the brain gets the signal about how to respond or what it means. Before the brain can quantify, the heart has either connected to the person we're in the room with and our hearts start beating together, right? Our brain waves start moving together, or they don't, and they repel and they rebel. And so whether you want to look at it scientifically, whether you want to look at it through a religious lens, whether you want to look at it through a historic lens, whether you want to look at it through any lens that makes sense to your mentalism, your perspective, it's all one. We are one piece When we really think about it, we are not hands and feet and hearts and heads and eyes and noses and ears. We are one piece of flesh that we have separated into different meanings and different things, but we've been given a singular vessel to experience this time, this life.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's an amazing breakdown. I love it. I love it. Let
Mhm.
me ask you this question. When did you begin studying people and then having enough confidence in your assessments to know, you know what, I'm gonna go public with this. And I'm gonna start doing these viral videos and whatnot. When did you get
Yeah.
the confidence to know I could afford to go public and do this?
That was the hard part. I had been doing that work, well, before I knew what it was, right? Yes, all parts work together. Thank you. They do. I had been doing that work in classrooms for a very long time. So, one of the first things that I always do in a voice and speech class with my students every semester, and I usually have my students for multiple years. So, these are people that I get to know really deeply. And every year that I have a student, the first thing we all do is we get up one by one and we present the same speech every year. And we call it the all right speech. And there's a couple different speeches that I use, but I started to use a speech from an August Wilson speech. And when the students would get up from year to year, I'd be able to see where the disruptions are happening in the body, where these disruptions are occurring. And when I started to study the chakra system and I started to look at neurolinguistic programming, which one of my mentors, Tom Jones, had studied, I didn't even know he had studied that. But when we were in class, he was looking at our eye movements. He was looking and listening to our speech patterns and the kind of language we were using and whether we were associated or dissociated and how we spoke about ourselves, whether our body was connected to our vocal expression or not. And all of these things that I was picking up on became a really big part of my voice and speech practice in class with students in order to help them get to a space where they could clear out enough of their habits that then they could play character. You can't play someone who is different than you if all your own habits and stuff are showing up all the time, because then all your characters are going to be the same. So you've got to learn how to clear, not abandon, not destroy, because you still get to be you. But how do you clear when you need to so that you can put something else on top? And then I started to realize, oh, well, regular people also want to know how to clear their energy and show up in the way that they have decided and designed through practice and rehearsal. And so, to really answer your question, when I decided to start making videos, it was because students encouraged me. I had a student when I was substituting at Pomona College, pretty close after the pandemic, right when we had returned back to the classroom. And I was giving a lesson about people who smile through grief, right? And the thing I learned was that people who smile through grief or through pain or smile all the time, when that smile, when you ask it to stop, I would go up to the student and just place my hands right here and ask them to keep speaking their text. And 9 times out of 10, as soon as the smile went away, waterworks, extreme catharsis, because that tension of the smile was holding back the emotion that needed to be released. And then once that emotion was released, the need to smile to suppress was released. And so then they could have an exchange where they were not forcing the energy. And so when I was told by my students after that lesson, you need to make a TikTok, I was like, I don't know what a TikTok means. I don't know why you would tell me to do that. I was like, I'm supposed to make a dance video about smiling. I just didn't get it. So I downloaded the app and I was watching videos and I came across this interview of Taraji P. Henson and Cash Doll. And Cash Doll had just, King Von had just been, you know, and she was still very much processing grief. But the entire time she's talking to Taraji, she's got this sort of frozen smile. And I was looking at the comments and I was seeing all these people say, like, why is she smiling like that? She's happy he's dead. And I was like, no, that's not what that means. And there was something in me that lit up that said, I have to say something because people don't understand. And they're attacking this girl who is deeply in grief. And if that smile drops, she's going to crumble. And I could feel it through that. And so I felt this obligation. And so I sat there at my kitchen table and I said, I'm going to make a video. And so I made this video and I thought, all right, well, that's not going to go anywhere. But I had a lot of fear. I thought, as soon as I say something like this, people are going to think I'm nuts and they're going to attack me. And I'm not ready for that. And I'm not prepared. And I thought, you know what? If that happens, I'll just never do it again. And I'll take the video down and like, oh, it's fine. So I put it up and I walk away from my phone and I go do something else. And I come back about an hour later and my phone is just going crazy. And this was the time when TikTok was really starting to become a thing because everybody was at home during the pandemic. And there were all of these new creators that were kind of starting to come into their own really alongside me. And we sort of had this community that we were kind of, that we would eventually develop after this. And I checked my phone after about an hour, 10,000 views. And I was like, what? I had been posting on Instagram, meditation, 1-minute meditation videos, and they would get, 30 views, 15 views. And I was like, okay, well, nobody cares about this. And I felt like, oh, suddenly this is a place where people are ready. And I said to myself, okay. And I heard this voice in my head tell me prior to making the video, do the thing you're most afraid of. And the thing I was most afraid of, even though I'm an actor, was being myself and talking directly into the camera. As an actor, you don't do that. As an actor, the last thing you do is look at the camera. You never look at the camera. You look at the partner, you look at the scene, you look at the thing, and that felt protective to me. So being on camera, I had done TV shows, I had been a series regular, I had been on stage my whole life. I was very comfortable being on camera, but not talking into the camera, talking to the audience as me, as Cece, not as a character, not without something to hide behind. And that's what I was afraid of. And so when I stepped into that space of the thing I was the most afraid of, and I finally said, this is what I know, this is what I've studied, this is where I come from, this is what I can tell you about why this video is significant. My entire style was born from that. And after about a day or so, this video had 300,000 views. And I had 40,000 followers. And all of a sudden I realized, oh no, there's an audience for this. People want to know what is going on. And from that point on, I've never been able to keep up with the demand. There's never been a time when I felt like I'm on top of it. Nobody wants anything else from me. It is just constant. I get DMs, I get emails, I get, people asking me to look at their personal videos and work with and I can only do so much. But the book was my way of saying, okay, I need something I can give to you and say, it's in here. And then we can talk about it so that I can help as many people as I can. Even though I can't keep up with the demand, I'm going to try.
And this is good because my great friend Winifred Summers in the building. She's a writer, public speaker, podcast host. She has a very interesting question about your videos talking about like a person eye moving, eye deception, and body language. She said she had a fear of when she does her videos, she kind of like turns to the left a little bit out of habit.
Mm-hmm.
And she's asking, would that be perceived as she's not being truthful or would it be mistaken? And what's some possible things she could probably do to get around doing that? One of her questions.
Okay, so here's the thing. Nothing about what we do is bad. Okay. There's no such thing as good or bad when it comes to body language. What we're looking at is a series, a collection of individual things that tell us a story. So just looking to the left or turning to the left is never bad, right? The left side is the feminine side. It's the yin. Okay. So it is the nurturing side, it's the receptive side. But when it comes to eye movement, we use our eyes to process thought. Eyes are deeply connected to the brain, right? We know that. There they are. So it's actually very difficult to recall or to process if the eyes don't move in the direction that your eyes need to move to process. Now, this can be the reverse for different people depending on how your brain is wired. So I did this little exercise in my class, my in-person class that I taught this past weekend, where I'm looking at the student and I tell this person, okay, ask me a question, ask me anything. And I'm just staring straight into her eyes. And she says, what did you do yesterday? And I'm staring right at her. And I cannot remember what I did yesterday because I am so focused here. And I said, I'm standing there, I'm struggling. Finally, something comes to me and I said, oh, I had dinner with some friends. Now, I asked them to ask me another question, ask me something else. Okay, what did you do, earlier in the weekend? Oh, I had my book party. I had this. I need to go away. I need to process. I need to introspect. I need to take my eyes away from the thing that is distracting so that I can go into my experience to process. So it's not always about lies. Sometimes we are creating and inventing. If we are creating and inventing language so that we can communicate something that we've never communicated before, we're going to invent. If we are recalling something that happened, we're going to find that memory by removing ourselves from what's right out here and taking ourselves up in a way so that we can process. So often we're watching people process, measure, introspect, but those things can also happen as parts of deception. I can invent because I was at the gas station, but I don't want to tell you I was at the gas station. So I'm going to say, oh, yeah, I went to the rodeo, because I'm inventing something rather than recalling an image or an experience that actually happened. So for me, recollection is over here, inventing is over here. But sometimes we are inventing even when we are telling the truth, because we are inventing language. We are inventing a way to communicate. We are stepping around saying the immediate thing that might hurt this person's feelings and finding a new way to say what needs to be said. If somebody said, oh, she's got a really ugly face, and I want to instead communicate to you, well, he thinks that you're not quite his type. I'm not lying, but I'm also not giving you a truth that's going to disrupt your sense of self. Right?
Thank you very, very much for that question. I got two more
There was
questions
a,
for you before I
oh, yeah,
get you out of
go
here.
ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to respond to the question that was in the chat about if a celebrity has ever, if I've ever had backlash from a celebrity about a video that I posted. The answer is no, never. In fact, especially for reality TV stars, a lot of them DM me afterward and thank me. Multiple times that has happened. A lot of the Love is Blind
Really?
cast, oh yes, which were like my original super viral videos, a lot of those people came to me privately. I've coached some of them. I've worked with some of them privately. I've had them reach out to me and say thank you. I've had people send me their clips on reality TV and ask me to analyze them. So this is part of how I know the work is real. It's the work, because if I can talk about someone that I don't know and it resonates so much with them, because this is what I do in my everyday practice. So it's not, I don't have fear about it anymore when it comes to celebrities, because I'm like, I've seen this 100 times. I talk about this every day. I saw this yesterday in session and I had it confirmed over and over and over again. So thank you for that question, because it's actually shocking.
I had a very, very important question. I want to make sure we get this. To the
Yeah.
future mothers, you have a whole thing in there about the root chakra and about those years from 0 to 2 years old, and
Yeah.
even before you're born, what happens in the womb and what the child picks up on from the womb.
Yes.
Speak to the future mothers. What should they be mindful of? The environment, how they're handling stress, whatever it might be. What's your
Yeah.
advice to the future mothers in the building?
Mm. Nurture the self before you can nurture anything else. You must fill your cup before you can pour from it. You must really take care of your health, your environment, your safety, your security, keeping your heart rate in a place where you are soothed, because your baby hears that heart rate. You transfer stress, tension to the womb. Uh, Sometimes the mother's distress can immediately affect distress of the child, or vice versa. So paying attention to your own distress, sometimes you're feeling something because the baby is in distress. And so you don't need to fix it, solve it, or nurture it. You need to go get help. You got to listen to that that intuitive thing in you that says something might be wrong. And when you get that tiny hit, listen to it before it becomes the hammer, right? They always say you get the nudge and then you get the hammer. So when you get the nudge, pay attention to it, ask for help, build your community, build safe spaces, support other mothers, put yourself in a space where you can find some community that's going to help support your mental health, your emotional health, your physical health, eating right, resting. It's huge. We don't live in a world where we allow mothers to rest long enough. New mothers, especially, don't get enough time off. They don't get nurtured by their communities as much. If in any way you can be that for someone else, you build that system so that then someone can be that for you. It's hugely important because those first few years when our child is vulnerable, it is up to us to provide their safety, security, and trust. They can't do it for themselves. They are the ultimate, most vulnerable beings that come onto this planet. All other animals are a lot more self-sufficient than we are. We got these big old heads that we can't even hold up. We can't move, we can't talk, we can't walk, we can't go to safety. We can't extract ourselves from a situation. And so how we provide that safety to the internal self first, this is also where healing comes in. Doing that therapy, working on your issues, working on your past, working on your safety, security, and trust, getting into that yoga class, developing your flexibility, learning your body, having a spiritual practice, learning to meditate, closing your eyes and listening, feeling that, fetus move inside you, talking to the fetus, playing music, recognizing that they hear stuff in there. So what's the environment that you're exposing them to? If you're fighting with your partner, what foundation are you setting? And that doesn't mean you can't fight with your partner. That just means that you want to make sure that if that happens, you nurture yourself as a result, that you heal it, that you repair it, or you extract yourself. You go somewhere safer. Okay. Great
Man,
question.
that's vital. That's vital right there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, One of my last questions about community healing, about community and healing. When it comes to the world of poetry and rapping, two things I love so much.
Mm-hmm.
Speak about the use of rap for community healing. And you
Yeah.
mentioned even battle rap in there. I love that. I'm a big battle rap fan. I know you're in
Yeah. Yeah.
the East Coast area, I believe. So battle rap is huge on the East Coast.
Yeah.
Think about community healing and using rap for healing.
Mm-hmm. So in the back of the book, there's a few projects, how to work in community to develop yourself as a speaker, to connect to people emotionally, physically, empathetically. And the reason why that's in there and it's so important is because this stuff can't be done in a vacuum. Communication doesn't just happen between one person. We do communicate with ourselves, but it's meant for each other. And though I developed the rap project because I wanted to decolonize and re indigenize my teaching. And teaching in theater, we work on a lot of Shakespeare, which I love also. We work on sonnets first, we work on American poetry first. But I realized, I was teaching in a New York City public school and at a New York City public performing arts school. So a lot of my students were people of color. A lot of them were Black students. And I knew what music they were listening to because a lot of it was the same music I was listening to. And we had just finished our poetry project. And I thought, how can we continue to deepen our understanding of poetry, but make it connect more now that they've got foundational tools to understand language? And so we would do this project that I called the Rap Project. And I forced all my other teachers in my department to learn it and to do it. And most of the other teachers are not Black. And so they had to overcome some of their stuff in order to do this project, which I felt was healthy to be done. Uh, and so what we decided to do was I had the students go and find a rap song that had some story element to it. So it couldn't just be about, do some dance moves or, whatever. It had to have some kind of element of storytelling, of which there are many, 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 many songs that like that. And so what I would have them do is find a song they liked. They bring it in. And then I'd say, okay, you're not going to listen to that song again until the end of this project. And they'd say, what? But I love it. Why can't I listen to it? And I said, because I want you to take yourself away from the music and what the music is doing to the rhythm of the words. And I want you to let the rhythm of the words themselves communicate with rhythm, with thought, not relying on the beat. I want you to be the beat and use the words to do that. And then they would all start to memorize because they had memorization tools now. They were understanding imagery. They were understanding onomatopoeia. They were understanding symbolism and analogies. And we had learned all these parts of speech. And they started saying, oh, well, this rap song, it has all the same elements that we learned in our poetry project. And I said, yes, it does, because it is poetry, right? There's hyperbole, there's analogy, there's all this metaphor, there's similes, there's all these things, there's alliteration, just like, there's half rhymes, there's internal rhymes. And so they start understanding, oh, rap is sophisticated. And so what did that start to do? It started to shift their cultural understanding of what music is, particularly what Black music is. And I felt that that was important because it is so central to us as people and our culture at large. And then once everybody learned their raps and they had adopted new rhythms, not what had been dictated by the artist. So they weren't doing it like, Biggie. They weren't doing it like Nas. They were doing the language from their own perspective, putting in the stops and the pauses and the emphasis where they had connected to the meaning through our work of discovering. And then on our final day working on these projects, instead of getting up and standing in front of the room and being stock still, I asked them, put this stuff in your body. We're going to put two people and you're going to do your rap and then they're going to do their rap and we're going to engage. We're going to circle around you. We're going to engage. We're going to cheer. And at the end of each battle, we're going to vote by applause who the winner is. And so we did this tournament and it became everyone's favorite project because they knew they were going to get to do this tournament and they were going back and forth. And I've got some old videos on my phone that I got to go back and look at. It transformed a lot of my students' ability to recognize that there is a place for them in performance because it upended a lot of what they had already felt was true. The poetry project, certain people who had succeeded at doing sonnets, and different people were the champions of the rap battles. And it completely said to them, we all have different skills and we all have different gifts and they're all valuable. And rap is poetry. And, Black music is art. And that is important to me. And articulation. You start to have a lot of respect for Migos if you have to use all that language and slow it down and see everything that's being said and you say, my goodness, this is so much, this is difficult to do, this requires more articulation than I had to use to do my Shakespeare, this is more energy, this is more breath control than I needed to do what people tell me is fancy and what people tell me is important in this world. So this project is so important to me and I hope people engage with it and try it with a group of friends because it will shift you. Even if you are Black, even if you have battle rap before, it will change you to use just the language and to step away from what the rhythm dictates into what the words dictate.
That's important because a few months ago, I had my writer friend Emily Rumble on the show. Her book is Bibliotherapy in the Bronx. It's an amazing
Okay.
book. But she speaks about using poetry and rap for her therapy practices. And I always say for her, and then the other guest I had, Cree Miles, there's these videos, and she's showing some classic hip hop verses, but she's showing you all the poetic devices
Yes.
inside of a Biggie Smalls or a Jay-Z
Yes.
rhyme. And I'm always thinking, like, why didn't our English teachers give us that when we was kids? Like, I would have been a way better student. I saw like, wow, Biggie Smalls was doing that. I didn't understand illusion and alliteration, and I didn't know what those things meant technically,
Yes.
but they were doing it the whole time. you know.
Yes. And that is why it is so important to re-indigenize and to decolonize our education system, because just because you don't feel as though you have access doesn't mean that you don't already experience this thing in your everyday life. It's just that we're not bridging the gap, and we have to do a better job of that. We have to bring people's cultural experiences. We have to allow people to find the way in that they already have access to, rather than telling them access to this thing is out here and I am the gatekeeper. No, no, you've already been invited in. You're part of this practice. Yeah. I
So
love
this is
those
what we
videos, by the way. I just came across them for the first time this week. And I was like, yes, this is exactly what we do in our rap project. And I was like, thank you. I'm so glad somebody is doing this for the masses,
yeah,
because we need it.
yeah, we do need it. It's very, very vital, man. So we land the plane on this. So the book is the root of awareness. Speaking
Yeah.
about the roots and the root chakra, all of these things. My question is, will there be follow-up books on different other energy centers, like as you're going along, or is it like a standalone project? Is a one-off,
No,
one
no,
and
no.
done kind of thing?
Well, now that I know how I process and how I put a book together, I know so many things now about how I would do it differently that I'm actually excited to write the next book. I'm going to let this one live and breathe for a bit, because I think that there's a lot in here that is worth taking our time with and really practicing with and diving deep into it. Um, and it really is a tool for my coaching clients predominantly, but for everyone. But there will be definitely more. I would like to do a book that is completely about public speaking and completely about how we work in rooms and what that real process looks like. How do you feel about interrogation rooms, such a tense environment? It's like they want to scare people into talking. They absolutely do, right? We have to remember where interrogation rooms come from, right? They are practice of the police. Where do the police come from? Slave patrols. What was the slave patrol doing? Who are you? Where'd you come from? Who do you belong to? Okay. So the idea of interrogation in and of itself, and the process of policing in and of itself, has a very dark history. And there's a reason why we feel nervous, we feel agitated, we feel uncomfortable, because anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Can and will. So,
And
yeah.
so to piggyback on that for a little small second, what I learned in my psychology classes, they talk about like how much false testimony that happens all the time, false witnesses, false testimony. And like you were saying earlier, in that moment, you're making me create something to get out of this moment. I don't want to feel like this. I'm gonna say anything to not be here. And people are going to jail for a long time behind come to
Mhm.
find out false things, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, it's it's one of the reasons why it's so important to know our rights, as much as they appear to be dwindling around us. But it is also, to me, why it is more important that we have community. It is why they say divide and conquer. It is why they separate you into different interrogation rooms. You have to have enough trust in your community that we already know. Until I have a lawyer, until I have a defense, until I have somebody who is here to advocate for me, do not speak. They can tell you, oh, I can tell by the way that you're looking that you look guilty. They're just saying that because they're trying to get to you. Get a lawyer, know your rights, have a community, prepare ahead of time. If you even if it's never happened to you, do you have a plan? Who are you going to call when you're in a situation like that? Did you demand your phone call? Did you ask, am I being detained, instead of just giving information? Do you know what rights you have to be searched? Do you know how to keep your property safe? It's really important that we as a community take care of each other, that we don't say, oh, cops got him. All right, let me keep walking. No, that's not. That is what they count on. So it's really important. that we keep our communities strong and that we communicate with one another, especially with young people. Okay. A lot of young people don't even know cops can't talk to you by yourself. They shouldn't be doing that. And if they think they can get away with it, they will. So, how do you make sure that without scaring kids, tell them what their rights are? Okay.
Yes, 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 man. I tell all of my guests, as you're writing the next book, man, come on back to the show. I love returning guests. I would love to promote your work and do more, advocate. I really, really stand by and believe in everything you're doing. Got my full support. Thank you very much for coming on to the show. And for
Thank
all of our
you.
audience watching this in the future, the next guest will be next week. The flyers are coming out. I have a Bookstagram queen, Nia J, coming on to the show, talking all about her Bookstagram experience. See y'all next time on the Sean P. Experience. And wait right there, please, Ms. Rice. All right.